Welcome to Free Human, a podcast where we explore the intersection of creativity, self-actualization, and the dharmic path. I'm Indigo, a dharma coach, medicine woman, and multidisciplinary artist. I guide humans through the process of remembering their true self so they can live in alignment with their soul. You are art that breathes. Your life is art. It's your intimate relationship with self and the universe. Every feeling, thought, movement, experience, and creation is your art. Your soul is singing a song, and the notes are weaving through the universe. To sing your soul song is to be free. This podcast is the fire circle in my Dharma garden, a place where we share our soul stories and medicine, nurture our curiosity, and weave our prayers into the collective. Thank you for being here. I am very grateful. When I take those few breaths, I travel from my head down through my throat and into my chest. And then I arrive in my heart. And when I arrive in my heart, I remember something. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Gosh, thank you for having me. Oh.
Yeah. I love being able to connect and tell the stories of being human. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And once we've dropped down, I like to ask a relatively hard question.
Why not?
Which is like, who are you, right? Like kind of an orienting question.
Yes, I am Elle. I identify as many things. I love being all the things. I love being none of the things. I love bouncing between the things. I identify as gender fluid. I prefer they, them pronouns. I'm a poet, a spellcaster, a writer. All of those things are the same to me. I'm also a visual artist. I'm an intuitive healer. I'm a kitchen witch. And on theme for this episode, I am a death witch.
That's so beautiful.
Thank you.
So yeah, when I really got to drop in with you, like your mind, body, and soul, like on all the layers, was so vibrant and alive. And it was like your heart field went way far outside of your chest.
Oh.
Yeah.
I got all tingly when you said that. Yeah. I do feel like I have a very wide open heart and heart space. I used to really almost overly value being a safe space for everyone else. But it really wasn't until I learned to be a safe space for myself that I really felt I was like, oh, there's my magic. Oh, there I am. I don't have to just be safe for the rest of the world. I can be safe for me. And that has changed my life.
Hmm. Yeah, I felt safety in categories that I don't come across very often with you. Like it was like suddenly like I felt safe to let out more of myself.
Mm,
And that was like a gift. So
mm.
thank you.
You're so welcome. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Mm.
And we definitely had something in common too, which is our relationship with pain being one of our greatest teachers. And that kind of led into talking about this story surrounding pain. And so, while we don't know where this conversation will go today, the theme of the conversation is a topic I actually love talking about. And at the same time, I feel a little nervous inside.
Understandable. Understandable.
Because of the topic. So, the topic we're going to talk about today is death.
Woo.
And yeah, since last night, I could feel it.
Mm-hmm.
I could feel the topic. So,
Yeah.
I'm really excited to kind of dive into this. And I feel like a good starting point might be just hearing your story.
Oh. Oh, thank you so much for having me and wanting to talk about this subject that is a beautiful subject that is also very intimidating. It it's hard for a lot of people, especially what society has taught us about death and to fear it and also to not talk about it. It's a very taboo subject. Yeah. Mm. My relationship with death is so fascinating. And I know I'm biased, but I think it's very interesting and that I'm very interesting. um, I feel I feel like chosen by death, which is a strange feeling. Um, my first, I've had a lot of death in my life. My first peer friend to die was when I was 12. And I've had many people pass in my life, and just a surprising number. And it wasn't until the pandemic during 2020 that I realized that the amount of death that I had experienced in life was not common. I had friends who had their first peer friend die during 2020, and that was like, oh, this is not, everyone doesn't experience what I've experienced. And that began just an interesting realization in my life. I've lived with like chronic illness and chronic pain for many decades, and I've had sections of my life where I'm like, oh, I was pretty healthy there. Often it had to do with where I was living. If the environment that I was in was a healthier culture, because I've lived several places, I would adapt to that, and the food that I would eat would be better, and my body would respond to that. I'm a very sensitive being. I respond to energy, to anything that I put in or around my body, not just food, but lotion or soap. My body is just incredibly sensitive. And I didn't want to admit that for many years. I didn't want to be as sensitive as I was, mostly because the world isn't made for sensitives, and there's a lot of shame around that. And because I had shame about being a sensitive, I wasn't willing to embrace the beauty, the knowledge, the wisdom that came with what my body had to teach me. And I wasn't in a healthy relationship with my body. I shamed my body. I I didn't like looking in mirrors. I didn't like looking at photos. It wasn't until last year that I realized that one of the reasons that I didn't like looking in mirrors or at photos or videos of myself is because I actually like struggle with recognizing faces. And so I wouldn't recognize myself. And that would scare me and confuse me. Like, how is this my body? How is this who I am? I don't see that. I would know who I was in photos and stuff out of context clues. But I've wondered if there were a photoshopped image of me in clothes that I've never worn with just my face, if I would know who that was. It's very fascinating. But the more that I have allowed myself to be who I am, which includes being a shapeshifter, I change a lot, I shift a lot. And the more that I've embraced that, the more that I can see myself in photos or in the mirror and be like, oh, I see you. Oh, I love you. So my journey with pain for decades was denial. I didn't want to feel it. I didn't want to be in pain, especially because it is really hard to be in pain and serve other people. And I had this martyr complex of my life isn't as important as the lives of those around me. So I cannot admit that I'm in pain. I cannot ask for help because I need to be serving everyone else. I also didn't want to be like the people in my past who had taken up so much space that it hurt those around them and affected their relationships and their loved ones, and they weren't willing to admit that or deal with that. And I was like, I don't want to be like that. I don't want to hurt people like that. So instead, I hurt myself. I think there is a beautiful balance to be found between taking up space and providing space. Mm-hmm. So after decades of ignoring myself, ignoring my body, my intuition, ignoring who I was, my body said no more. The practicals of my story, I will tell briefly. The practicals, I feel, are not as important. My life, like every life, is like the creative process. I thought the end goal was the answer and the point. I thought the diagnosis held the answers. But in reality, it's the journey, it's the process, it's the things along the way. So to get the practicals out of the way, to get into the really yummy stuff, the practicals are that last year, in the spring of 2023, I experienced this really unique dichotomy of both getting healthier than I had been in a very, very long time, and at the same time, I started getting sicker. And I didn't understand how that was happening. But for the first time in my life, I had a regular practice, both physically and spiritually, to take care of my body and my mind and my soul. And I was like, oh, this is beautiful. And the most potent medicine during that time that was helping me during my healing was self-love. For the first time in my life, I was like, oh, I think I like me. Genuinely, this is pretty cool. I'm pretty cool. Okay, I'm going to investigate this feeling. And then at the same time, I was getting sicker. I was having these cramps in my body and this fatigue that was just growing. Like, the fatigue was growing, but this energy of self-love was like, oh, I got to keep going. This is great. Like, yes, I'm tired and I'll rest sometimes, but something's coming. I could feel this bubbling up in me. I could feel something was coming. And at the time, I didn't understand psychic intuition. I didn't understand the power of my words or what I was writing, but I was writing. I mean, almost every day, things were pouring out of me. And 1 month before my death experience that I had on June 7th, I wrote a poem to death, and it was a letter. And it was like, "Dear Death, I feel like you're going to come and visit soon. I don't know who in my life is going to die. I'm very curious the conversations that we will have, because anytime that you visit, we have beautiful, wonderful, interesting conversations. Difficult, hard, scary, yes, and also beautiful at the same time." So I wrote this poem, this letter, very curious. Put it away, didn't think about it. I also felt like really inspired to write letters to my loved ones. And I was not suicidal. My mental health was better than it had been my entire life. I was just like, if something were to happen, I would want people to know. I would want people to know that I loved them, that I did the best that I could, that I learned to love myself. I was like, man, I just want to leave hope. I want to leave this world a little bit more hopeful. And back to the practical. So I did not know that I had a mystery pelvic infection brewing in my body. And when we look back at the symptoms and the history and what happened, it looks like the symptoms began in November of 2022. So for about 6 months, it was like brewing in my body. And each month, the cramps got worse, the fatigue got worse, and it would ebb and flow. I'd have good weeks and bad weeks. The night that it happened, I was in the living room. My partner and I were watching TV, and I asked to pause. I was overcome with this wave of pain, and the cramps had been increasing, and I had been ignoring them because to be in the body of a woman means to be in pain, right? We're taught that our whole lives. Beauty is pain. You know, women cramp, people with uteruses cramp. Like, this is just what happens. You should get used to it. You should not worry about it. You should work when you're feeling horrible. You should take care of your home when you're feeling horrible. All of these messages are drilled into us. And all I could think was, there can be nothing wrong with my pelvic area. I have had one sexual partner. We've been clean. We both have been clean. Like, I was like, it's not possible, is what I told myself in my body. That I told my body, you are wrong. The message of the world is right. You are wrong. Oh. And I think my body was just tired of being ignored and of not being loved and treated correctly. So the night, it was about 9:30 at night, and I paused everything, and I just doubled over. I doubled over, and I was in basically child's pose. I think that's right, like face down. And when I got all the way crumpled into my little fetal position, The pain was more than I had ever experienced in my life. And I know pain, I've lived with it. But during this time, I was learning to be in my body. I was learning to love myself. And so I was more aware than I had ever been before. And at the peak of the pain, I felt myself shoot up out of my body. And I looked down at myself, crumpled, and I asked my body, I said, what is going on right now? What is happening? And I felt this voice inside of me say, we are in unfathomable amounts of pain. This is how we're keeping you safe. My body loved me so much that it opened a door, let my soul lift above me so that I could take some rest before what was about to happen. The voice told me, no matter what happens tonight, whether you pass on to the next life or stay in this one, you need to know that you are good. You are enough. You are good. You are enough. And the voice just repeated this over and over to me. And then they said, okay, it's time. Go get to your bed and trust. I don't completely remember exactly what happened next. I slammed back into my body. I sat up. I turned to my partner and said, I need help getting to the bed. I'm in a lot of pain. I didn't know how to communicate what was going on. Even to this day, I'm like, how do I explain everything that happened? Because it really is just otherworldly. So he helped me get to bed. I laid down. I curled up into the fetal position. And the moment that I laid down and I just got into that fetal position, I was like, this is it. I started shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My whole body just shook for probably 10 to 15 minutes. My partner was reasonably concerned, and at the same time, I had had pain episodes as long as we had been together. So seeing this was not completely uncommon. Shaking is a very common response to pain, to overwhelm, to stress. And because I'm a very sensitive body, shaking was just very common for me. I shake when I'm nervous, I shake when I'm excited, all of it. So from his perspective, there wasn't a difference, particularly in this episode. I've also had nonverbal episodes where I couldn't speak. And so he just sat with me. Sometimes would put a hand on me, but didn't know that this was something different. And after I started shaking, the pain was so intense, and the shaking was very scary because I couldn't stop it. for such a long time. It had never lasted that long before. And shaking, it's intense. To shake for over 10 minutes is a very long time. And so I shot back out of my body again. I floated above my body, and I kept hearing the voices. Every time I left my body, I heard the voices. You are good. You are enough. And I floated further up, and there was just this black expanse. When I started floating, there were these little peaks of light, these little stars, and then the further up, the darker it got. And it felt like I was laying in a pool of warm water. It was the most peaceful, beautiful experience. I mean, I looked down, I could watch my body shaking, I could see the pain, and I could feel echoes of it when I was outside of my body. But I was like, oh, this is beautiful in this place. I love this place. Why have I been afraid of this place my whole life? I've feared leaving my body my entire life, and yet at the same time, I didn't want to be in my body. I was scared of being in my body, and I lived in this in-between of dissociating so hard that I wasn't in my body, and at the same time, I couldn't reach this state of peace. And the in-between, liminal space has a lot of power, but you can't live there. You can't live there forever. And shifting all the way up into that warm water that just exuded peace, I was like, oh, I don't have to fear this. I don't have to fear the liminal space. That must mean that I don't have to fear being in my body. I am good. I am enough. I don't have to fear. I can trust. I can trust in myself. I can trust the process. I can trust universe, God, spirit, divinity. Everything is okay. I don't remember the exact moment that I came back into my body. It was like waking up again, where you're not 100% sure when you woke up, because there's just that period between sleep and waking when you just float. And it was like I laid in that warm water and the pool slowly drained. And then suddenly I was like, oh, I'm not in the water anymore. It was so fuzzy. It was like fog was everywhere, like the black expanse. The light was slowly turning on with a dimmer switch. The water was slowly just dissipating. I remember a moment. I wasn't sure that I was done dying. I was pretty certain that this was just a prelude. I did not expect to wake up in the morning. It was so intense and also so beautiful. I was so at peace that I was just like, oh, we're good. This is it. I didn't want to scare my partner. I did not want to die in a hospital. So I turned to him. I asked him to go get me something from the store, some medicine to help, because I just needed a moment. So he went to run an errand, and I wrote down what I thought was going to be my last words. I was that certain. And I was like, I just want people to know that I love them, and that this was my choice, and that they don't have to feel guilty or sad or afraid. and I wrote down a few words. He came back. He went to get me some oxygen. So I breathed in some oxygen, and then I turned to him and I said, "Thank you for our life. We've had a beautiful life and I love you." And then I went to sleep. I did not expect to wake up. And when I did, at 7 a.m., I was so confused. I was shocked. I was excited. Also, there was a feeling of sadness. I thought I was going to go float in the peace forever. Okay, I guess I'm going to deal with this. And also, cool, I get to do this again. I learned all the things that I wish I had known sooner. And I get a second chance. And I knew something was wrong in my body. I knew there was some kind of infection at that point. I knew this wasn't normal. So I said, we got to go to the hospital. I didn't know what else to do. So we're getting ready to go to the hospital. I could barely walk. And the moment we stepped outside and the sun hit my face, there was this funny moment. I felt like I had never felt the sun on my face before in my life. It was so beautiful and delicious and warm, like the water and not like the water. And I stood there for a moment, face tilted up to the sun, and I thought, maybe the sun can just heal me. I have never felt something so beautiful on my skin in my life. Maybe the sun can just heal me. Maybe the earth can heal me. I didn't know the power of those thoughts and those words at that moment, because I then spent the next 3 months being bounced from doctor to doctor, from hospital to hospital, appointment after appointment, medication after medication. And the practicals of it was, after 3 months, I decided no more. Everybody's telling me what to do with my body, how to fix this, what to do. And I think all these medications, all these different things are not working. And the thing that worked was listening to myself, getting off every single medication, all of the side effects that was causing it, paying very close attention to what I put in my body and around my body. And that also included who was around me. I was very specific about what I told people, and who the very, very few people that I did allow to see me during this time, because I was very confused. And also I knew that I needed to trust my instincts. The body is so fascinating. It has so much wisdom. The body will tell you if you feel safe around the people that you are around. It will tell you if it doesn't like the food you're eating. It will tell you how to listen in ways that you have never listened before. And the more that I learned to listen to myself and my body, the healthier I got. That was my reward. My reward for taking care of myself was feeling better, was feeling more myself, feeling more love, more peace, more hope, more beauty, more authenticity, more love. And so for the past year, that has been my goal. Listen to the body. Listen to what I know deep down in my gut. They call it a gut feeling for a reason. Like, your body is telling you. Your body has the wisdom. I used to deal with really bad insomnia. When you sleep, it is in a lot of ways similar to death. You kind of leave your body, you float in another realm, and you have no control. Not that we have a lot of control in this life. We pretend to have control. Sometimes we feel like we have control. But really all we can control is ourselves. How we respond to ourselves and the world around us. Owning that, owning the power of what you can control, which is you, and choosing to wield that power with responsibility and honor and love. That's what changes the world.
I just want to take a moment and thank you for telling that story. Wow. That is a beautiful story.
Thank you.
In all of its paradox. And okay, so I have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
One is, so after you were at the hospital, they didn't really, like, did you get any better, or did it just kind of stay the same?
I mean, I kind of got worse. The infection got better. They ran a bunch of tests. They were like, well, you have a pelvic infection, but it's not an STI. It's nothing that's coming out in the test. We don't understand. We can see it inside of you. We don't know where it came from. The one thing that they told me that really changed my life, that was like, I needed this piece of information decades ago, was that I have a hypertonic pelvic floor, which means that my pelvic floor is so tight that it can't relax properly, and it doesn't like allow the body to release and breathe. A lot of people talk about, do Kegels to strengthen your pelvic floor. I didn't know that for a lot of people, Kegels can be unhealthy because they're just tightening something that's already too tight. So going to pelvic floor physical therapy, learning exercises and somatic release, and dancing. Dancing is one of the best things for your pelvic floor, whether it is tight or loose. Dancing, and specifically twerking, like shaking your hips, shaking that ass, is literally medicine. Literally medicine. There was one doctor that was able to tell me about my hypertonic pelvic floor. They put me on so many rounds of antibiotics to kill the infection because it was pretty persistent. So I went through about 5 rounds. What I didn't understand is that a single round of antibiotics can take up to a year for your gut to heal from. And I went through 5. So I didn't understand that all of the medicines that they were putting on to help me, the side effects were brutalizing my body. But I didn't understand that because I was already in so much pain. How do you differentiate between the pains when your whole body's on fire? So last summer, I was prescribed, I counted at one point, and it was over 24 medications. I did not take all of them because at one point I was like, you guys are just throwing stuff at me. You're not looking at my history of what I've taken. I would have doctors in the ER that didn't know what to do with my pain levels and just gave me really heavy stuff. And I was like, I don't know if I would have said yes to that. Things were done to me in the hospital that I did not approve of. The medical trauma was really intense. There were things I learned along the way that were super powerful, like the hypertonic pelvic floor, like understanding that I have the genetics of hypermobile joints. People who have Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility in any form are significantly more likely to have pelvic floor issues. Because when you're hypermobile, your joints are trying so hard to hold themselves together. They hold extra tension in your body, trying to literally keep you in one piece. And when you hold that extra tension in your body learns this, and it keeps this, and it needs the release. It needs you to let go, but it's really hard to do both when you're naturally hypermobile. The pelvic floor is also connected to the jaw and the throat chakra. So whatever you've got going on down there, you need to be able to talk about it. You need to be able to relax this area in order to relax this area. I didn't want to talk about sexuality or identity. I mean, the pelvic region, this is connected deeply to both the root and the sacral chakra. My foundation, my identity, who I was, who I said I was, it was not in alignment. And because of that, I wasn't willing to talk about it. I wasn't willing to let it out. And so I held this tension. I held this tension in my body, in these places in my body. And so everywhere hurt. The whole body is connected. The whole body is connected. Everything about it. The arches of your feet are also connected to your pelvic floor. I mean, it's all one piece. So you have one piece out of whack, everything else is going to feel it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for diving a little deeper into that, because I just had to know.
Yeah.
I'm like, what are these details here?
Yeah.
Okay, so my next question, and you were segueing into that already, which is like, okay, so you were one person before this, and in your case, you had like a literal death rebirth in the most extreme, probably, fashion that is possible.
Yep.
And so I'm just really curious, what did this rebirth look like for you? What was this before and after?
It was fascinating because the 6 months before my death, when I was learning more about myself, learning to love myself more, one of my agreements to myself was to be more honest about what I wanted. And one of those things that I had felt a lot of shame about in my life, that looking back is fairly simple, was that I did not identify with or love the name that I was given at birth. And that there, for some reason, there was just shame. Like, this is what I was given. Shouldn't I be grateful for this gift? Shouldn't, there was thought and love put into this, and shouldn't I honor that? And I was willing to honor other people over myself. And so I was like, other people are allowed to change their names. I always honored other people's choices. Absolutely. Change your name, change your pronouns, change your gender, change where you live, who you live, like everything. Always honoring other people. And during those few months before, I started noticing this. And there was one moment where I met someone who is now one of my very best friends. And I knew there was something special about this friendship because the moment I met her, I told her a secret She was like, "Hi, what's your name?" And I was like, "I don't know." And the funny part was that I was being introduced by another very dear friend of mine who had known me for several months at that point, like deeply. We had hit it off quickly, so she knew me really well. She's standing right there and she's like, "What?" And I'm like, "I don't really know what my name is. I don't really like what I was given, and I'm not really sure what to be called right now." And this lovely human was just like, "Well, do you want to pick something for me to call you now, and then you can change it whenever you want?" And I was like, "Okay." And I gave her a name that I don't give anyone else. And she's like, "Sometimes I still think of you as this name." And it's a lovely name. For some reason, the thing that popped out of my mouth was hellebore. Hellebore is the word for a flower that blooms at night. And I just loved the word. I loved the meaning, the depth, the like dark, the beauty, all of it. And I was just like, sure. Me, for now, I guess. And her response of like, "You can change at any time. I will honor at any time who you decide to be. I can love this version and the next version and not shame you for either of it." And the power of that moment, the power of trusting the right person with my truth, that response changed my life. And so 2 months before my death, it was another one of those moments. I was at an event and we went around to introduce ourselves. They said, "Who are you?" And I said, "Oh." And I had been kind of sitting with it and it just came out. And I was like, okay, I like this. And I will be honest, I don't know if that is my forever name. I feel like it is kind of a placeholder. I like it. I think it's interesting. I love that there are many different ways to spell it. And I have friends who spell it many different ways. I spell it many different ways. I don't care how it's spelled. It is the phonetics, it is the sound, and knowing that if I make this name fluid now, then it can also shift with time into whatever that may be. My friends have many nicknames for me. They know that names are a weird thing, so they call me a lot of different things. And that honoring of that, I love. The other portion of identity and rebirth was that this is very true for like the year to 2 years before my death, but especially the 6 months before, I had really started to pare down my social group and who I spent time with and who I talked to. And I asked, 2 months before my death, I asked almost everyone in my life to give me space. Again, I could feel something brewing. I was like, something's weird. And I didn't really understand how to verbalize that to people, but I just said like, I'm gonna go on a journey. I went on a little silent retreat. I spent some time in isolation. I spent more time journaling, and I was like, I feel so intensely the need to be what other people want me to be, that I wasn't taking the time to realize that maybe what they need me to be is my authentic self. I wanted to people please so bad, and I can tell what people want me to be. And I'm a good shapeshifter. I can be that so easy. You want me to be soft and feminine and easy and inviting? Sure. You want me to lead and take charge and dominate? Sure. But I was not listening to what I wanted or needed. And I needed to remove everyone from the picture for a little while so that I could take that time in isolation to be like, oh, this is who I am. Not just this is who I am, but this is who I want to be. The power of words has been something that I have gone back to over and over and over. I love saying things out loud with my friends. The people that are in my life now have been a very careful cultivation of my social garden. I spent a long time weeding my garden, clearing out everything from there, and slowly being very meticulous. I do want this plant in here. I do want this medicine in here. I choose this space for this. I like this flower in my garden, but sometimes this flower can take over. It has really strong roots. So maybe this flower goes in its own container. It can still exist, but it is not in my soil. I can choose where to move the container and how often it spends time in my garden. All of those choices. And the pattern that I have noticed for the people that I choose to be permanently in my garden is that they know the power of their words. When we get together, my closest people, we feel so great. We feel so powerful. We feel strong, smart, capable, beautiful, handsome, magic, all of it. And we say those words. One of my favorite phrases that I say with my friends is, the whole world needs this medicine, and we get it. How lucky are we that we get to love this much, this deep, this beautiful, this brutal, like, oh, it's messy and I love it. And we talk about things and we go deep and we also go light and we have fun and it's beautiful. We deal with the spectrum of existence and we aren't afraid to both dive deep and fly high. So in those moments, we speak words of encouragement, not just of each other, but we allow each other to be like, I'm feeling really good today. I'm feeling really confident. I am feeling very loved. They say that affirmations, like scientifically, have been studied to be powerful and to change lives. But the interesting studies that I've learned about more recently are that yes, affirmations are powerful. Words are powerful. Affirmations are even more powerful when you say those phrases when you are feeling that way in your body. By all means, when you are feeling down, say, I am loved, I am lovely, I love myself. Say those words when you're down. But if you can remember in the moments where you feel it fully in your soul, say those words out loud, because it's like supercharging a spell. If you're feeling that in that moment and you say out loud, I am loved, I love myself, I am lovely, I am love embodied itself. So that when you do feel down and you say those words again, your body remembers. So your body keeps score, your body knows. So say those words when you're feeling that. And if you're not feeling that, find spaces where you feel that way. Find people that make you feel that way about yourself. Because the people in my life that see me for who I am and call me on that. Why are you doubting yourself? You know, that good friend that can call you on your shit, that is like, why are you doubting yourself? Let's remember these times. Let's remember the ways that you are loved. Those are the simple moments that change your life.
Yeah, the way I love that description of like quote manifestation, because the way I describe it is that like, and it's so hard to describe with words kind of how this works, but it's like if you do allow joy into your body, into your life, into your body, it signals that you want more joy.
Yes.
And that doesn't mean you're not going to experience pain still. We experience everything. But
we really do have more control over how long we stay in different categories.
Yeah.
And it's more malleable than I think some people experience. And so it's like the internal thoughts and emotions and physical actions and everything and your true energy is what's going to manifest it. So you do have to feel it in your heart. So you were saying like you were saying like spell cast while you're doing it, right? Like, and you can amplify it even more. Like when you feel it in your body, you can share it with friends, which is like a field of energy. It amplifies it, like 3 or more, like amplifies. And so then it's like you're speaking it, you're amplifying it, you're experiencing it, and then it signals more. It grows. You're watering it.
Yeah.
Which is so beautiful. And that's like it's how you can change your life significantly.
Yes. Yes. And the brain likes to find patterns. But like the neural pathways in our brain, they love patterns. They love seeing the things that lead to other things. So the more that you invite something into your life, the more you will find it. You're recognizing the pattern. It's like when you buy a new car and you've never had a car this color before or this brand before, and then all of a sudden you're seeing it everywhere. You're like, oh, that's my car. Oh, that's my car. Like once you start noticing the pattern, you see it everywhere. And it's so funny. I have a very distinct car. It's big, it's bright blue. And it's funny because I have had friends in the past be like, I used to never notice this car, and now I see it everywhere because I know someone who has it, and I've realized, like, I've noticed it, it's in my mind, and now I'm seeing it everywhere, and I wonder if that's you. And it's the same way with energy, with words. You can choose what you invite into your life. If you are complaining all the time or focusing on one specific thing, it's probably because you're really not allowing yourself to process through it. And also, you're teaching yourself, this is what we're paying attention to. This is what is important to us. And it's so interesting how science proves magic, like the placebo effect, studied by science. Nobody fully understands it. All they know is that the brain is powerful enough to create its own reality. When I was really, really sick, I started studying spontaneous healings. There's a book studied and written by a Western doctor just called Cured, because he was fascinated. He was like, I don't understand spontaneous healings, and they've been reported over and over and over, but Western science isn't really studying it because they don't understand how to predict it. They don't want to give people false hope. It feels, hokey or a little weird. But the more that you study it, you're like, oh, you can choose. You can choose. And not saying that it's going to be 100%. There is still the world around us. We are still affected by what we eat, what we're surrounded by, the environment that we're in. It does affect us. And at the same time, we have power if we are willing to tap into it. But the hard part, the reason that people resist that is, in order to tap into the power of your mind, you have to spend time in your mind. You have to spend time investigating every corner. And there are dark corners in our mind. We've been shoving things away that we don't want to deal with our entire lives. That's just how society often imprints upon us, that we need to survive by ignoring that stuff that is unsolvable, that is too hard, because, we're told that you aren't capable of handling it, and in order to sit with that, you have to sit with the scary parts. You have to sit with your shadow. You have to sit with the pain. And sitting with the pain, it hurts. You have to be willing to hurt, though. because the way I've begun to understand is that there's harmony in everything, there's balance in everything. The more that you are willing to dig deep into the hard, into the dark, into the pain, the more pain that you can feel, the more pleasure that you can feel. But they are not guaranteed. Just because you feel really deep pain, it does not guarantee that you will feel really intense pleasure. You have to choose it because you have to go through the pain. You have to be able to transfer that. You have to learn how to alchemize that in order to get there. But I promise it's possible. The way that pain shifts in the body, the way that the mind processes pain and pleasure exist in the same part of the brain. Just like anxiety and excitement trigger the same part of the brain. I love studying the brain and brain scans and just the power of the brain itself, the power of the brain, the power of the body. Fascinating. If two feelings, emotions, experiences exist in the same part of the brain, that means you can alchemize it. That means you can transfer it. That means you can kind of play the trickster god. You can convince your brain that what you're experiencing is just mislabeled. Telling my body, oh, we're not anxious right now, we're just excited, has changed my life. Going to big events, speaking on stage, having hard conversations with people, I feel that invitation of anxiety in my body. And I sit with it. I'm like, I don't think we're anxious. I think we're excited. I think we're excited to do the thing. I think we're excited to come home afterwards and rest. I think maybe both of these things can exist at the same time. Same with pain and pleasure. You can experience both at the same time. This is why I find the BDSM community so fascinating, because people learn to ride that line of pain and pleasure, and things that previously caused them pain, they can experience pleasure from it. They can take trauma and turn it into kink. They can turn it into pleasure, into goodness and joy and experience and power. These things that took power from them previously, from whatever trauma they've experienced, you can transition that trauma into power. You can own that experience. You can play that out on a stage. You can be your own director. That is magic. You are magic.
Yeah, I love the book Existential Kink. So good. After I read that, I just spent every day for an entire year telling everybody they need to read this.
Yes, so good.
Okay, I have a couple directions I want to go, but first, I'm wondering if we can dive, starting to feel some pain in my body. Dive into the portal of pain and kind of go down in it. And there's a few things I kind of want to explore. Is one, the layers in the energetic realm and the physical realm, and how to find the messages to get through to that pleasure spot. And then also, I know just from talking to you in real life, that within pain, I thought this was really interesting that how to find the pleasure, even when you're in really deep pain, you can still find some pleasure. So those two things I really want to dive into. So the first one, I'm thinking back to how I was saying we've had I have also experienced really deep physical pain in my body, neuromuscular pain from mold. And so for a long time, it was it's almost a 10-year journey for me. I couldn't figure out the answer. And every week the pain just got worse. And I still didn't have an answer. And it just kept going and going and going. And then at the deepest part of the pain, I was like, if I don't find the answer, like, I don't think I'm gonna live another decade. Like, I was doing the math. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, if this keeps getting worse, I will not be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And so at the very bottom of it, when you're with pain, it like, well, for me, like the layers that it broke down are like, there's this track that I think at some level we kind of all are on, which is like we're trying to be like improving ourselves all the time. Like, and I had to come to terms that like I was actually decaying and that I had to be okay. And so suddenly I had experienced like doing math again. I was like, wait, I'm unable to do things that my 70-year-old mom's able to do right now. I was like, this is so it's like I felt like I had experienced what it was like to be 80.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I experienced massive decay. And I had to like, through that process, I began to accept that this is a part of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like that softening in me, the softening of my shoulders hunch over more, like that I feel like a knobby tree, like that we break and, you know, we don't always get better.
Yeah.
Or we have to live with some sort of ailment for the rest of our life. And in coming from my past, being an athlete, and at one point I was like competing in CrossFit, I was like, I will maintain perfect health for the rest of my life until the very end.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, and then I came to a level of acceptance that like, it's okay. Like if things soften, that things bend and so that was like a really deep layer of it. But the other layer was that there was an ancestral energetic tie in there. And it actually, like, I had to go through the layers, that there was like nervous system layers, that there was like there was patterns and ways of being that I had inherited that were so underlying that I couldn't see them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to explore that, and that was really hard to access.
Mm-hmm.
And then I know there's so many more, but I'll just do 3 for this. But I would say the third one is it ties to this, but it's action in the world. Like, it was like, okay, like, how many times do we not take the action? And I would see this because I was in pain communities, and there'd be people shouting like, get out of your house, leave this situation. I mean, like, it was like, it can be really hard to take action, because any action in this culture that involves a lot of money, for example, people will not take action because of finances.
Yeah.
I mean, legitimately, when it comes to mold, like, I had to leave 80% of my belongings.
Ooh.
The amount of money involved to remediate my house was so high. I was like, next year, I'm okay. And I kept pushing it. And it was like, it comes down to like, are you gonna choose like, oh, I wasn't choosing my life. I was like, oh my gosh. And that really hit me. Like, and it finally got to the point where I said, everything aside, I had to choose my life.
Ooh, yeah.
And that's when I took this, like, then I didn't care. There was no barrier. I had to remove all of these barriers that seemed very practical and logical and all the things. And I was like, I had to come to terms with the fact that I actually wasn't leaving it. I could have left it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't I leave or take the action, right? Like, you felt pain, but you didn't take the action. It's like, there is like extreme action that can be taken that's actually choosing self for a lot of people that are in pain.
Well, also, in those circumstances, you are choosing death. Like death and rebirth, same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And choosing an action, leaving your house, changing your financial state, choosing yourself, you are making a choice to not only invite death into your life, but actively choosing death. And because we are taught that death is scary, that you should stay, like find your one life, that's the goal. Keep the status quo. Don't upset those around you. We are taught to be afraid of death. And so the moment that death is required, that rebirth is required to truly live, we feel this contraction because we've been taught our whole lives. Death is scary. Death is bad. Don't think about it. Don't talk about it. That's weird.
Yeah, you're choosing life, and it was the death of my home. I had to throw away everything I owned. It was hard.
It's so hard.
When I stripped everything out, and I started with my garage, and because I have young children, I mean, you just begin every new house you go to, you have little kids, you're like, shove everything in the box. So it had piled up. And so I felt like I had taken 2 decades of things around with me.
Uh-huh.
And that day that everything went out of the garage, I felt like hollowness through my entire chest, and it was cold air, and it was an energetic cleanse like no other. And so when that was happening, then I started to remove everything from my house, and at the same time we were having a pool removed. So there was a jackhammer in my backyard, jackhammering the literal earth underneath my home while I removed
was shaking
everything. And so it was a major death.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because my home is really it was I didn't want to leave my home.
Yeah.
I did not want to leave my home. It was the home that I always wanted. I'm here. This is the home I've always wanted. I've gotten to this place. This is the home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually choosing that over my life.
Mm-hmm.
But I love that it's the paradox of I chose life and I chose death.
Yeah.
And it's just oh.
Well, life and death are the same thing.
Yes.
That's a whole other conversation, but life and death are the same thing. Having experienced that, when death occurs, life occurs at the same time. It's I've talked to people in the past about they're engaged, they're getting married, and they're like, why am I sad? Why do I feel like I'm grieving? Why do I feel depressed? And I'm like, because yes, this beautiful thing that you want to happen is happening. And at the same time, this is a death. This is a death to one way of life and one path, and a path that you've been on for a long time. This is closing that door, that even if you choose or life chooses to send you back to singlehood in the future for whatever reason, it will never be the same. And most people don't want to deal with that. So they're like, I'm just going to be happy. I'm not going to deal with the feelings. But every choice in life is also a choice in death. When you choose to go to work, you get in your car. Yes, you're making a choice, and you're also choosing not to choose something else. Every choice is both life and death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I really found that as I got onto the path of soul, and I had the first time I had my biggest death rebirth, it was okay, I'm on the path of soul now, right? And that's really what I signed up for, is just bigger and more frequent death rebirths. And it's just now it just happens. I allow it to happen over and over. I couldn't even count. It's just now you can see it on all these micro things, the small, medium, large, and so but we do get kind of squirrely when we get into the big ones, again, because you're no, I already did my really big one.
Oh yeah.
You mean there's another big one?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I don't know. I feel like I already did that, and I don't really want to do it again. And it was hard.
wasn't that enough in this life? Like, I'm good. And you're like, oh, okay. And the more you get comfortable with that, and you know that it actually feels good
Yeah.
once you, yeah, like it, then you can, it normalizes, I think, a little bit too. And that can be, it's kind of nice that it normalizes, or that you understand the process enough to be able to be not feel like 100% lost during it. Now, it doesn't always happen in the same patterning, so you don't always know, but like, you know, if you don't know, that you'll know later. And I think that's like really all you have to know.
You know that you don't know, but it'll also be okay that you don't know, but you'll know later at some point, and maybe, and I don't know, it does, okay, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really all you need to know.
All you need to know is that you don't know, but also you know, and it's okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why this topic is so hard, is that there's not like definitive answers. I'm literally sitting here being like, I don't know, I peeked behind the curtain and saw the other side, and like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Think about it, but also don't think about it too hard. And good luck. Like, there's just so much ethereal unknown to this that is so interesting. Oh, there was something that I wanted to jump back on. What was it? Just one moment. The thing that I think is really interesting about this is we just talked about how the more pain that you allow yourself to experience, that you don't just like shove away and ignore and disassociate from, it does not guarantee that you will feel pleasure. People get lost in the pain or dissociate from the pain because they've gotten lost in it, and they're like, well, I'm not feeling the pleasure, it's not worth it. The thing is that you have to invite both into your life, and people often forget to invite pleasure. Our society doesn't teach us to embrace pleasure. It doesn't teach us about our bodies. It's something that you have to seek out. You have to choose. You have to choose both life and death. And that has been a really interesting thing of learning to invite the pleasure. Like, okay, I've been in the deep, dark depths, and now we're going to spend time in this other realm and balance that out, because it's not guaranteed. I see people all the time that they experience really extreme, difficult pain. I've watched family members, I'm like, your whole life you were bitter, that all the pain that you went through, you didn't know the potential, the power. You've been storing all of your pain, and you didn't know that if you took that jar of pain and just like released it, that you can use it to alchemize into pleasure. You didn't know. And that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about all of this stuff that is so intense and scary and sometimes painful. I mean, my body sitting here telling this story, I'm feeling spots in my body that are just like, oh, we remember that. Oh yeah, now that you're talking about it, we're gonna feel that. And there, it's just like taking moments to reassure my body, and also remember that, yes, we're talking about the pain, we're also talking about the pleasure. And my body's like, oh yeah, we learned all that good stuff, all that yummy stuff, all that, like both and, yes, and.
Okay, so I would love it if you have an example you could share of like alchemizing pain into pleasure, because I know what it feels like to be like in the pain long enough that like either like I look at it from a part's perspective. Like, I have a part that's like, it begins to talk and it has like its own dialogue about the pain, and it like it starts speaking to like the people like about the pain because it wants to resolve it. So it just like speaks about it, and it has its own like way of feeling. But like the longer I'm in that pain, like I remember times feeling like I can't, like, how do I get out of this?
Yep.
Right? Like, and it feels so dense that the energy of it can feel really dense. And so I'm wondering, like, what is like one or more, whatever, like you want to share, like ways of like going from that I mean, because a lot of people experience that density, and then they might get out of it a little bit, but they sometimes, like, if you're in the really density, you may come out a little bit and then you go back into the density. But to go all the way to like pleasure is a lot of layers out.
Yes.
And so I'm like, yeah, I'm curious, like, if we can dive into that.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Okay. Oh, I love this. I love alchemization. First things first, any physical body is capable of this. It takes time and practice, and it's just learning. Like your brain creates those neural pathways. Like your brain is a forest, and if you're walking down the same paths all the time, that path is super worn and you know exactly how to do it, and you're like, this is the direction that we go, this is how we get from A to B. But then when you start venturing off of the path and be like, you know, we've never taken this route before, but I'm starting to see these trees kind of separate here, and maybe this is a shortcut, or maybe this is a more beautiful route than this one, or maybe I don't even want to go to that destination. Maybe I'm not trying to get from A to B. Maybe I'm trying to get from A to yellow. What are we doing? So, we've talked about the power of the body. We've talked about the power of the mind. We've talked about the soul is the soul. It exists. There's wisdom in all of these different parts of you. I want to talk about how to create a language with your body. Talking to the body is a learned thing because the body doesn't speak English. And the way that the mind works, it's interesting how people's minds work differently. I would love for anybody listening to take some time to think about how your mind thinks. This was an exercise that my friends and I did one night where we were like, how do you think? What form of thinking does your brain go to? And some of us were like, well, we're visual thinkers. Anything that I'm saying plays out in a movie in my screen, in my head. And then some people were like, no, I just have words. I have like a teleprompter. I don't have pictures. And for me, I think a lot in colors, in energy, in shapes. Being a visual artist, I think in a lot of different forms. I mean, I'm a writer, but I'm a painter, I'm a sculptor. So I've learned that I have many different modes of thinking, and I can choose the mode of thinking that is most effective for my goal. So for however it is that you've spent some time thinking, how do I think? What's the ways in which I think? That is an interesting exercise, and maybe talking to your friends. How do you think? Just start conversations. For me, because I see a lot in color and taste and energy, I love doing like a body map. Get yourself into a meditation mode. Take some deep breaths. Even if you just have time to take 5 deep breaths, sit with your body and think of just an outline of your body in your mind and wonder, okay, are there specific colors or shapes or textures in different parts of the body? If this body was a thermal map, what colors would show up where? If this body was textures, would your knees look like grains of sand? Would your heart look like a little fuzzy, fluffy thing? Or would it be like lava rocks kind of protecting? Like, what does your body look like? And just take note of that. maybe draw it out. I've done exercises where I've drawn it, I've used colors, I've used just black and white. How are you seeing your energetic body? And this is just taking time to get to know yourself, get to know your mind, get to know your body, get to know who you are. The very interesting thing about learning to conversate with the body is that you get to choose the language that you create. Something that I have done for many months now, the body doesn't understand the difference between writing an email that you really don't want to write and being chased by a tiger. Your body is like, we sense danger. And you're like, we're fine. We're not actually in danger. Nobody's actually dying. But your body doesn't know that. So sometimes the body starts setting off alarms and is like, unsafe, unsafe, unsafe. And if you are ignoring that, the body will get louder. The issue is that if your body tells you that you're unsafe, and you tell your body, no, we are safe, and then you are wrong, and your body was right, then your body is going to be like, oh no, we can't trust ourselves. And you start writing this message into that, which is what I did for many, many years. I didn't trust that when my body felt uncomfortable about people in my life or family members or coworkers or friends even, I would be like, I feel unsafe, but I think it's fine. They have the best intentions. And people can have the best intentions. They can be doing the best that they can possibly be doing, and it still not be a good fit. You are not saying something horrible or negative when you are just saying like, hey, this relationship isn't a good fit for us right now. That can be a gift. But if you are choosing to stay in situations where your body feels unsafe and you are not listening to your body, you are writing codes in yourself that are damaging. So you have to learn to rewrite that as you start to listen to your body. I have been learning different ways to tell my body that I am safe and that we can trust ourselves. One thing that I do that is very simple. There are times when my body is like, hey, we are unsafe. And I know deep, 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 deep down that I am safe. That this is not one of those situations, but my body learned something else in my life. And I'm like, hey, I'm really sorry we learned that. I'm sorry that I didn't listen to you before. I promise we are safe. And I do this particularly before I go to speak on stage, before I do a performance, or if I'm going to have like a hard conversation with someone where I'm like, hey, I know this feels really scary right now, but we are actually safe. We're not in danger. We are in our own power. We can trust ourselves. And I just tap. I tap my heart space. And it's something that is very innocuous that people aren't really going to notice significantly. And so before I go on stage, before I perform, I just tap, 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 tap. And then every time that I do the tapping and then I go through the situation and I am fine, you remember what we just learned? This is our new language. This is part of our vocabulary. This is a sentence. This is a whole book. This is what we're rewriting. And the more that I do this, the more I can feel my body physically relax. The tension starts to leave. Other ways that you can do this are deep breaths. Oxygen is so good for the body. Deep breaths, it relaxes your muscles, it relaxes that pelvic floor. We hold a lot of tension, we clench our ass when we're really nervous, and that feeling, like if we can just let the shoulders relax, pull things down, take some deep breaths, stretch the jaw out, maybe make some sounds, things that our body does when we're safe that it doesn't do when we are in danger. Start making a list of those things. Things that we do when we're safe would include drinking water. When you're, an animal in the wild being chased, you don't stop to take a drink from the river if something's chasing you. You're gone. So do the things where if you were physically being chased, you would not stop to do. You would not stop to dance. You would not stop to make art. You would not stop to make love. What are these things that you can tell your body, we are not in danger because we are doing these things that don't go with danger? But it takes time to let your body, being in pleasure, especially if that involves intimacy with another human being, your body doesn't let you have sex if you're scared. Your body doesn't respond the way that it needs to respond in order to feel pleasure in those moments. So you have to be very slow. You have to take the deep, deep breaths to relax the body. Then find the areas of the body, the pockets of your body that feel good. So my invitation for learning to alchemize pain into pleasure, as you're learning a new language with your body, create your language, whatever that may be. You can also create pockets of language, pockets of phrases, pockets of pleasure. Pick a place on your body that naturally feels good, is one of your favorite places to be touched. I love, my neck is very sensitive, and it is my throat chakra, very connected to my story, to my life of not feeling comfortable to share who I am, my story, how I'm feeling. So there's a lot of sensitivity there because there's been a lot of pain. I used to basically have neck headaches in my neck where it would just tense up, and I'm I don't know what's happening, but I feel like I can't breathe. So taking the very deep breaths, just running my fingertips up and down my throat and my neck. This is very calming to me. So when I do experience pleasure, I can just run fingertips along here. I'm oh, I feel those pockets. I feel those pockets of pleasure because this is a very sensitive area in my body. And learning okay, this area that I felt a lot of pain in before, I feel pain there because I'm sensitive there. If you feel pain in an area of your body often, you are sensitive there. So finding the moments where that feels good to you and reinforcing that, just okay, I'm just gonna stroke this spot real nice, just over and over. Okay. Oh, that feels nice. Oh, we relax into that. You're creating this little bubble. And then when you do experience times of intense pain, that same motion, that same bubble, you're just going to tap into that and be oh, I remember the pleasure. I remember why we like this. Okay, so in this moment, I'm experiencing both the pain and the pleasure at the same time. That's so interesting. I didn't used to think that I could do both at the same time. Okay, so if that impossibility from my past is happening now, what other impossibilities now could happen in the future? Approaching everything with intense curiosity, intense non-judgment, intense what if? What if I really am magic? What if I can hold all of this at the same time? What if I can transmute pain into pleasure? What a power. For me personally, the way that I learned these things was that I would go into such intense waves of pain that I would shift out of my body. And it was scary, but also when I shifted out of my body, I would remember the peace of death, the calm, the trusting of the process. And I'd be like, okay, when we go back into the body, I think we can hold that peace and that pleasure and that trust at the same time that we experience this intense pain. When I would be in the body holding both at the same time, the pain would be so intense that I would have moments where I would black out, like losing consciousness. And there's just that invitation where I wake back up, come back into the body, and there's the paths in the brain. Be like, oh, okay, I'm in this liminal space, this in between waking and sleeping, this in between life and death, in between pain and pleasure. I can choose which road I go on. And it's not going to be a flip of a switch, because you've got to build that path through the forest that was never there before. So maybe you go down that path a little bit, and then you're like, I don't know how to keep going. I don't have a flashlight. We're going to take the other path. And your brain is like, okay, we had to go back and do the thing we've always done. No shame, no judgment, simply curiosity. Instead of being like, oh, we didn't make it all the way down that path, be like, hey, we went further down that path than we had before. Do you remember when we didn't know that path existed? Okay, no shame, just curiosity, just interesting, learning. Maybe that path isn't the best path for pleasure. Maybe there's a different pocket in the body that we're going to learn about. This took time for me, but there have been moments where I have learned so much from the pain about like, hey, this is happening. Okay, well, maybe that pain happened not just because of a physical reason, but maybe an emotional thing that happened popped up and caused this physical pain to amplify. Maybe there's something else going on top of it. Pain exists both in the physical and in the spiritual, energetic, emotional realm. They go hand in hand. The body doesn't know the difference between feeling emotion and feeling pain because it's all just feeling. So your emotions are going to exhibit in your body, which is why when you're having those really good moments with friends, with lovers, with chosen family, and you have those beautiful moments of like, I feel great. This feels beautiful and yummy and confident. Okay, I'm just gonna take that. I'm just gonna put it right here. I'm just gonna put it right here and tuck that away for later. So when something comes up in my body and it hurts, it also comes against that pleasure. Like, oh, hey, maybe there's less room for pain than there used to be because there's so much pleasure. There's studies done about storing things in the body in different places, and I knew someone who studied this, and she wanted to embed that into her body, and she picked like her liver area. The liver is about cleansing, and it stores a lot. The liver also represents anger. We hold anger in our liver, so those moments of goodness, she would just tap her liver, hold it. Be like, okay, we're gonna cleanse out what doesn't need to be here, and we're gonna put in the good. So finding the places in your body and learning yourself, okay, this chakra is a struggle for me. I don't feel a lot of stability in my life. So my solar plexus, it's a battle right now to feel grounded and stable and centered. Okay, how can you embed confidence in those moments? If you're experiencing a moment where you're like, hey, this feels like this area of my life, this feels connected to this. Okay, how can you touch that area, So lay a hand on that and infuse your energy, say your affirmations out loud, and bring strength and bring memory into that spot, because clearly it's remembering something else. So you want to infuse another story in there. You know, this is why like tattoos are very powerful. Where you choose to get ink on your body will infuse something into your life, because tattoos are very painful, and at the same time there's medicine in them. If you are struggling with feeling loved and you choose to get a tattoo that says I am loved, where are you placing that on your body? What part of your body do you feel like needs to remember that message? Choosing the power that you put into your body.
Mm-hmm. There was so many beautiful things and modalities for people to explore. And I gotta touch on a couple of them.
Mm-hmm.
One is that for people, let's say they have a flare or they're like bedridden for a period of time, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's where like I think the lowest moment can be. And like all you need is the what if, the belief. There's the belief is like, and you have to believe it more than once.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because a pathway is like got a deep groove. And so to get out of that like ditch, it's like gonna take a little bit. And so when you're like, instead of thinking, and I did this like a month ago, and a mutual person we know told me a story about how you found a pocket of pleasure. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. Cause like sometimes when your body feels like pain, you're like, well, that I don't get to experience pleasure right now because it was just pain. And it's like an either or.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really easy to either or it. And so, but just finding one little pocket is an opening.
Yes.
That's a bigger deal than, and I think the most profound practices sound so simple, but they're extremely profound.
Mm-hmm.
And so finding that pocket is a huge deal.
It's a huge deal.
One.
And
yeah.
Then people don't realize what a big deal it is. They're like, oh, I didn't do that. I just found a tiny pocket. And I'm like, that's the portal.
Mm-hmm.
Like you walked past it because you were like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Like that portal of that pocket. And for me personally, what I will share about my journey is that once I found those portals in the body, I have had moments where I have been completely bedridden, unable to walk. I cannot take care of myself. I have learned to reach a state of meditation, and it is not easy. I've been doing this for a year now, and it's not easy. And at the same time, it's practice. You learn with time, but it's also only been a year. So I've learned a way to meditate in my body when I am having extreme pain episodes, screaming, crying, can't walk, can't move, blacking out. And the invitation for me personally, the portal that is mine, that anyone else is welcome to find in their own body, but the one that I have found in mine is through shaking. I was shaking when I died. It was uncontrollable, scary, also beautiful. But the uncontrollable shaking in the body, I mean, it's what animals do when you know, if you watch especially bunny rabbits. Bunnies are so interesting, so cute, so nervous creatures. When they are chased and they get out of their chase situation, they will sometimes like pass out on the ground, and then their body will just start shaking. It will release all of that nervous energy. Dogs do it when they're excited, when they're nervous. If you've seen a dog in a storm, or when you get home from work, animals shake in all different forms. And so do we. And I learned, okay, I shook at my death. Shaking reminds me of death. I also shake uncontrollably when I orgasm. My body rides the waves of pleasure and energy when I reach climax, and my body shakes. Understanding that my pelvic region led to my death and also has led to my pleasure, that I shake both at death and at life, that is the portal for me. It's like all the atoms in my body vibrating are able to transition and just quantum jump into this new reality where instead of experiencing only pain, I am experiencing pleasure. So in those moments, if I can release into the process of my body feeling the pain that causes my body to shake uncontrollably, it's like my mind almost forgets for a moment where I am. And in the midst of extreme, excruciating, unbelievable, unfathomable, there are not words for it, pain, I have an orgasm. It's wild. There aren't words for it. And that pleasure may not last forever. I often go back into the pain episode after that subsides, and at the same time, the chemical release from the body having an orgasm, the physical relaxation, that what happens in the mind, in the body, when you have an orgasmic release, they've studied the science of that, and it is the brain responds to that the same way that the brain responds to pain medication. The body is able to reach that state of chemical release from physical activity that causes the body to go, oh, maybe we're not in pain. Maybe we're good. Interesting. Curiosity. What if? I don't know. Maybe I heard that wrong. Maybe this is different. Maybe this is just curious. And if you can come to that, like, what if, that curious, that non-judgmental, you can look at a map in your brain and be like, oh, there are a whole bunch of possibilities. Oh, what if we chose this? What if we chose that? Curious, curiouser and curiouser. Learning that practice and just understanding, like, wow, like, how cool that the body can have those moments, but finding that portal, like finding those pockets of pleasure. Okay, we can feel pleasure in these spots that we used to only feel pain. Oh, interesting. Oh, shaking was scary before, uncontrollable. And also dancing and twerking has healed me. It has been medicine to me. So, okay, the power of shaking, the power of moving, the power of somatic release. How can we talk to the body and let the body talk to us and tell us what the medicine is? The pain told me that the shaking is the medicine. When I was like, the shaking is scary. And they were like, okay, yes and. Yes and dichotomy. It can be both at the same time. You can be scared and excited at the same time. It's possible. Mm-hmm. You can feel pain and pleasure at the same time. It's possible.
I love hearing your experience. Thank you for sharing that. And I like how when we hear each other's experiences, what you're opening up is possibility, because in so many different avenues to explore, because you really do need to like know what is for your own body, because there's not one way to traverse all of this. And yeah, and for me, speaking of dance, for me, like I sat at a computer as a creative director for like almost 20 years. And that whole time, my body was still and rigid and like stressed and confined and all that stuff. Right. And so that was like my main pattern. And we were speaking about like, man, you have to rewrite the patterns of movement in your life, and you have to go down different paths. And for me, for this one, I now give myself permission to move at my computer at all times. And so when I give myself permission, I actually move 80%. I don't move like 10% of the time. I move 80% of the time when I'm at my computer. And so when I move, what happens? Like, I feel good. When I'm moving, I feel good the entire time. So instead of feeling bad and being like, well, when I sit on the computer, that's just when I don't feel good, right?
Yeah.
I actually feel a ton of pleasure sitting at the computer by moving. And so, like, that's another example of like, if we have these really baseline ways we move through our life.
Yeah.
The things we do, like we have really deep repeating patterns. And it's like movement, ecstatic dance, primal movement, whatever you want to call it, your body wants to move, and it can move so softly because it, it's like if you have pain, just find one aspect of your body that can move. Maybe the whole thing can't move because everybody's on such a different timeline, whether they need to detox from something from their body, whether they just it's a trauma pattern that needs to be released. Like there's so many different layers of people's pain journeys and why they're there in the first place and how they need to move through them. It's like, and why people are searching for them. It's so unique and so layered. And it's not just like a vitamin protocol. It's not just like this one thing that's going to fix it. It's like you have to learn like about like the entire aspect of your entire being, which is like the trauma healing. It's the somatics. It's everything. It's alchemy. And so I love that. Like it's, like staying curious and finding new ways of being.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's necessary.
It's just learning. It's so holistic. And whenever people are like, oh, like, what got you better? What was the thing that fixed it? And, the best thing that I can say to that answer was literally just like listening to myself. Because in reality, like the things, I had to cut out a bunch of stuff. I had to add stuff in. I worked with herbalists, shamans, death doula, like, there were so many things because there were so many things out of sync in my body. And it takes so many different ways, but it takes that curiosity and that willingness to like not give up or settle for what everyone else is telling you to do.
Okay, so I would like to go into one other portal with you.
Yeah.
And okay, so we touched on the like death, rebirth, but I would like to hear a little bit more about, 1 year is not a lot of time.
Yeah.
This is quite a rebirth.
Yeah.
Okay, so like, what is this rebirth? Like, what happened? Who are you? Like,
yeah.
And it's so, I don't even know where to start. I feel like you'll just intuitively know where to go with this, but I do want to hear more because it's a huge transformation. Huge.
Yeah. It's so wild to me that it's only been 1 year, really. And I've talked to some people about it that either met me like last fall or they met me in the spring right before, and they're just like, I did not know you. Like I did not know me. But it is just so curious. I've always been a creative. I've always been an artist, never fit inside of a box. And I think people always thought that I knew who I was because I was already outside of the box a little bit. And they're like, oh, you have to know who you are if you have really colorful hair and you're a painter. And the biggest difference for me was that I created so much work for other people. I wore my hair a certain way for other people. I dressed super colorful and vibrant because I wanted other people to like see that and be like, oh, that person looks fun, they look safe, they look open. I wanted that so badly. The rebirth for me has been creating art that no one else sees. Creating art that is mine, writing poetry that it doesn't matter if it's bad. It's not for anybody else. It doesn't have to matter. It's okay if it's cheesy. It's okay if it's cringe. It's okay if the painting isn't what I want it to be, or it isn't marketable, or it's not going to sell well. Creating for the mere purpose of putting something into being and not worrying about the end product, but it being the process, it being learning along the way. You know, it's so, it hurts my soul the way that capitalism and consumerism is all about the end goal and the marketability and making it a mass product. Like, the purpose of things being to sell to as many people as possible. And I used to want to be that. I used to want to make everyone feel safe, every single person. And so I would be a million versions of myself to match each person. The rebirth for me has been saying no, has been saying yes to the things that might make some people uncomfortable. One of the things that has been a huge, huge deal for me, on the anniversary of June 7th of that death experience, I threw a party. I threw a masquerade ball. I told everybody I was going to have a death party. We were going to come together. We were going to dress however we wanted, super crazy, costumes, dress like the way you've always wanted to dress, or the way your inner child wants to dress, or that Halloween costume that you wore one year that was so cool, but like you're not going to wear again because where are you going to wear it to? This. You're going to wear it to the lunatic ball. And there were moments planning this and specifically inviting people, even people that I knew, handing them an invitation that said, you are invited to the lunatic ball, a death day party. I was like, people are going to think I'm psycho. People are going to think I'm so weird. People are going to be afraid or confused, or the one that like really got me was people are going to think that I'm so self-centered. What makes my story so special? What makes me so great that I am throwing a party that's not my birthday, that is weird and also a little traumatic, about a really heavy subject that most people don't want to talk about, and I'm asking you to dress up and buy tickets for it and invite your friends. It was an edge to ask people to pay money to come to this weird event, to dress a certain way, and also hear me speak. I had a few different performers. We started with a sound bath. It was so beautiful and so healing, and I just watched this crowd of like 70, 75 people be kind of like, what are we doing? And why are these singing bowls ringing and this drum is going? And what is everyone else kind of like looking around like, are you doing this? Are we doing this? What's happening? And as people really dropped into the meditation, dropped into themselves, I watched some people get off their chairs and like curl up on the ground, get into child's pose. I watched people just tears streaming down their face from sound, from sitting as a collective, dropping into this potentially very difficult conversation. And that was, I knew the moment, like I knew that was how I wanted to start the event. And it truly was magic. And then from that point on, we had some poetry performances. We had a character performance of someone who created a story and a character that performed. And then the last was me telling my story about how I went from hating who I was and being whoever other people wanted me to be, because I didn't think it really mattered, to saying, no, this is my name. These are my pronouns. This is my identity. I am not ashamed. I refuse to be ashamed of who I am, where I have been, what my story is, and I will share this to those people who A, are open and willing to listen, and B, the people that I choose to tell my story to. I did not choose to tell this story for a while. I told it to some people, and honestly, sometimes my story was repeated without my permission, and that felt weird for me. And I was like, wow, the power of words and choosing who I tell this story to, who I trust this with. And I knew that I wanted to tell this story on a podcast over a year ago. I saw this in a vision. I knew this was what it was going to be. And I'm so grateful for you to like create the space for me to share this, because there is so much power in words. And I do believe that I have a beautiful story to tell, and a hopeful story, and a story that is medicine. And that is why I created the Lunatic Ball. Like, I'm doing this event every year. And the event finished with a big group dance party. Talk about like somatic magic. Like everybody just moving and dancing, and everybody felt so free because all of the performances and the sound bath, everybody dropped into their body. We had like a homemade appetizer spread. We had these herbal potions, this alcoholic-free bar, and each drink, each herbal mocktail I created with the energetics of the herbs chosen. And so when people ordered their drinks, they ordered the I am abundant. They ordered the I am loved, the I am inspired, the I am quantum jumping. And the power of people ordering with those affirmations and then drinking the herbs that energetically matched that, it was just fascinating to watch everybody and just be like, I created this. My community created this. We also invited everyone to an art project to redraw the death card from tarot. I've taken some courses and studied, and I'm fascinated by tarot and the introspection that it allows people to have on their own lives and the conversations that it creates. When I read for people, or I have people read for me, it doesn't really matter what cards are before you. It's about allowing the conversation that needs to happen. So we invited people to redraw the death card from tarot, however they view death. How do you see it? How do you imagine it? How does it feel to you? And it was fascinating to watch people put onto paper things that I'm like, I never thought of it that way, but that's beautiful. I would not have thought to do that, but that is fascinating. Thank you for sharing your mind with me. And having these art pieces at the show, the art, the food, the energy, the dancing, like this is part of my rebirth, is unashamedly being myself, inviting other people to unashamedly be themselves, and to literally celebrate that with a party, with a podcast, with a conversation, with a poem, with an art piece. What are you creating out of your own magic? Do you know that you're magic? Do you see it? Do you share it? Are you feeling pleasure in your magic? Are you feeling pleasure in your rebirth? You can choose rebirth at any point. You can choose who you want to be, what you want to be, how you want to be, how you want to speak, how you want to present yourself. You are choosing every single day. That is your magic, your choice, your decision, your life, your death, your rebirth, all of it. It's you. My rebirth is choosing my own power and taking responsibility that my decisions affect not just me, but those around me. And that is a power. Be aware of your power. Be aware of how much it affects you and affects those around you. I want to be aware. I want to take responsibility. And at the same time, I don't want to take it too seriously. Don't overthink it. The simplest phrases have power. Choose to speak that power into your life with wisdom. Think about it, but don't think about it too much. It's that balance. You've got to find where you are. Where are you? Are you thinking too much, or are you thinking not enough? Nobody can make that choice for you or help you understand that completely like you can. You should know yourself better than anyone else. And you do deep down. But are we taking the time to really know ourselves? My rebirth is about knowing myself. Every time that I look at a photo of me or look at myself in the mirror and just, oh, I think I do see me. I think I see me. Oh, isn't that cool? Isn't that curious? No shame that I don't always recognize myself. No shame that I didn't recognize myself in the past. Just curious. Interesting. Curious.
Yeah. So, okay. So one of the things that I am is like an illuminator. And so I see people's light. I help them illuminate their light. And of course, like, we have to alchemize what no longer serves us in order to shine brighter in the world. And so your experience is like one of the deepest like levels of pain a human can experience, and having an actual like physical death is like it just doesn't get any deeper than that, right?
Yeah.
And so coming in contact with you, I'm immediately feeling like I experience people's like light and gifts and magic. I can feel it energetically, somatically, like, and I see it in its current state, and I can also see like probable timelines into the future, right? So I can see it, and then so if you come near me, I kind of like open the space. And so coming in contact with you, and we were at a retreat together, so we spent days together, right? So I really was like got to experience you, right? And but I was like overwhelmed by the light, like overwhelmed by the diverse artistic nature within you. But then you as a writer and a wordsmith, and your understanding of language, your use of language, your expression of intimacy, especially too, like it was like I suddenly was in a field where the categories in which you had chose joy and connection and intimacy and expression like was intensely beautiful. And it was like more than it was the most I had experienced, like. And then I saw you with people you know really well, being intimate with them, and it was like suddenly I saw a world of where the authenticity and intimacy and the love and pleasure was like living in an amplified state. And it was like a lighthouse, and like it was like a lighthouse that I was like, the world needs to see this. Like, this is not common, but this should be common, right? Like, and I'm like, wait, there's a gap. And then I was like, I feel the gap within myself. Oh, like, and so that magic, and it's so hard because everything, like so many things we experience are like, well, there's not really, the language falls apart so much more than the the physical lived experience of it. And so I will search for the words regardless, but it's like, okay, yeah, I'm really abstract. Like if I were to take it out of abstraction and down a layer, like what would be that layer? And it would be like physical touch with friends. I'm like, oh, wow. I'm like, how many times have I touched any of my friends like earlier in my life? Like not very much, because I was more in the business world context, and and so that's even more like physical separation. Even I'm friends with people, we're in like where I'm at and the spaces I'm at, or like you're either at a dinner, so you're at a table,
yeah,
or you're at work, and so when we were in this space, it was like, it felt like something that I had never seen or experienced, which is like that friends can actually touch each other. And I mean,
yeah,
like stroking your forehead, for it's a great example. It's something like my mother did. My friend, like, I'm like, oh, the thought of my friend stroking my forehead, I have discomfort right now thinking about that. And I'm like, but I don't want to. I mean, it's like, because it's like, oh, that feels like that's possible. I'm like, I do actually desire to do that, but like, how do you
ask?
How do you get to where that's at? And so my question is like, how did this come about for you? Like, and what is this?
Oh yeah. Platonic touch is magic. And it was something that I first experienced in college, like 15 years ago. I had friends that like platonic cuddling was super safe and super normal within like a small group. But then we had people outside of that really judge that, because people think that physical touch is sexual and sexuality is shamed. So transitive property, sexuality is shamed, sexuality and physical touch are connected, physical touch is shamed. As I got older, left college, it was less common. I mean, when you're an adult, to ask your friend as an adult, be like, can you hold me like a baby? Can you stroke my forehead the way that my mom did when I was a kid? That is so vulnerable. And this is why the people and the community that you choose to surround yourself with, can you give me a minute? My cat just came into the room and I need her to...
Yeah. I was like, your cat has entered the podcast.
Let me get her out and start that statement over. Hi, baby. I know. I love you. I know. Thank you so much. Okay. Bye for now. Okay. Oh, my body is like, you were talking a lot about moving and then not moving.
Oh, I feel it too. Yeah, we're gonna have to move, right?
We're gonna have. I was like, I literally was thinking, I was like, maybe we can dance when we're done with this.
Yeah, my body is like, please move soon.
Okay. This is where the power of community and who you choose as your chosen family, who is in your life, has so much power. Like, I truly believe that my intuitive nature of weeding my social garden before my death experience is part of what saved my life. There were people that when I asked pretty much everyone from space, there are people that did not come back into my life that I still love very deeply. I love them so much. I wish them the best lives. I do not think that the person I am is the medicine that they need for their life right now. And I don't think that they are the medicine that I need for my life right now. But they were medicine. I learned so much from them. And I hope that they learned from me. And it breaks my heart that things were not easy. And at the same time, I chose me. And I don't want to feel shame for that anymore. And it is so interesting that the people that did come into my life since then, and the people that I invited back into my life, almost all of them are very physical touch people, or at least are comfortable with me asking for things. Having friends that saying, hey, I want to have a cuddle party. It's not sexual. It doesn't have to mean anything different. This is not a come on. I merely need to be held, both energetically and physically. And that intimacy, like if you are struggling to find pleasure in your sex life, start with platonic touch. And communicating is such a big portion of that. Like, and when I first was around friends that platonic touch was normal for them, I said no. For months, I watched friends of mine cuddle and touch, and I said that does not feel safe to my body right now. I honored my body. I honored what it asked of me. And it said, I am not comfortable with that. And I said, okay, we want that intellectually. Our body's not ready for it. We will honor that, and step by step. And so there were times where it was like, hey, can I hug you for a long time? What are your ways? Same with how we talked about finding inches of pleasure, pockets of pleasure. You're not going to explode in pleasure from 0 to 60. But finding the pocket, saying, hey, like I just want to be hugged for a while. Could you stroke my hair for a little bit? Like finding ways where you're like, hey, this would feel good to me. This would feel safe. The amount of healing that my friends have provided for me, there are not words. The medicine of them saying, you can be whoever you want to be, and also you can change at any time. I can love this version of you and the next. That is just fascinating. Finding one person at a time where you're like, hey, both my mind and my body is a yes to being touched by you in some way. And listening to that response from your body. If your body is sitting next to someone and you're like, I don't feel like I can move, there's tension everywhere, and you don't feel like you are able to relax, you take deep breaths, you feel stuck, maybe that person is not safe for you. And at the same time, you have to be curious enough to say, maybe they are safe, but the narrative inside of me is changing that. And being aware that it can be that, and at the same time, trusting your body. Me saying no over and over, and honestly, the people in my life that I said no to, and I watched them not take it personally, honor it 1,000%, and also not make me feel guilty. You know, I've watched other people where they'll say that they honor my no, but then I'll hear them complain about someone else's no. And I'm like, that's sticky to me. That doesn't make me feel like my no is honored. Watching how other people talk about other people is a big deal. For me, like if you're talking about other people in a way that makes me feel uncomfortable, or that you wouldn't talk about them if they were in the room that way, I'm not going to feel safe in my body to be around you. And so having friends that honored my no for months was like, oh, if they can honor my no, they can honor my yes. I think my screen might have just frozen for a second. Okay.
You're back.
Okay. Having friends that can honor my no tells me they can also honor my yes. It also tells me they can honor my maybe, or my I am not okay with a full body hug, but could we maybe hold hands? Like, the in between is also okay. And for me, testing the no was a big sign. Testing the no taught me so much. Also, we talked about pockets of pleasure. If you find an area of your body that feels a lot of pleasure, asking a friend to platonically touch that area. Okay, so we talked about feeling the affirmation that you're experiencing and saying the affirmation while you're experiencing that emotion. If you want to feel pleasure in your body and add pockets of pleasure wherever that may be on your body, if you can relax into your body and let someone else put that pleasure in your pockets, you're going to amplify it in that same way. You're going to be boosting your spellcasting power because you've got two people doing the same spell. That is why platonic touch is so powerful. Like, oh, it doesn't have to mean anything sexual. It's safe in my body. That's another thing. You're not going to, when you're being chased in the jungle, you're not going to stop for a cuddle. That's not going to happen. So if you're stopping for a cuddle, that must mean that that person is safe. If you're saying yes and your body's saying yes and they're saying yes and their body's saying yes, that energy is going to amplify one another. All of these different ways of telling your body that you're safe, you're good, you are allowed to feel pleasure, you are pleasure, you are magic.
Thank you so much for sharing that. There's I see your medicine. I mean, like your rebirth has been so big, and then your medicine just spills out everywhere. And of course, it's in pleasure, in the realm of pleasure, because and it's large in that area because you have you get it, you went deep, now you get to go high.
I know. I get both.
Congratulations.
That is my reward for making it to the end of the board game.
Yeah.
Okay, I made it through the portal of death. My reward is that I get really great pleasure. Okay.
Yes.
And that's another way to not feel bitterness. I think that the invitation to feel bitter about pain is very real and it's very understandable. Pain is just hard. It's so hard. We're not taught how to deal with the pain. Society does not teach us that. And so, learning to choose the pleasure, learning that your reward, if you choose it, if you're willing to let yourself feel it, because you do have to sign up for it. It doesn't just happen. You have to cash in the tickets that you won at the arcade. You have to cash them in to get the prize. You can't just play all the games, get all the tickets. The tickets are not your reward. They're not. They're just paper. It's like money. Money is not your reward. That's not the goal. So you got to take those tickets, take all the things that you gained, and you got to look at all the options and be like, oh, that's pleasure for me. I'm going to get that thing. Oh, I choose this one. And seeing what your options are. And if you don't know what your options are, talk to your chosen family, talk to your friends. And if you haven't found those people yet, start calling that in. I understand that community is hard to find for a lot of people, that safety and openness and acceptance and authenticity can be hard in this world, in this community, in this society, in this culture. At the same time, you do have the power to call it in. You do have the power to seek it out, learn how to have conversations, learn how to meet people, go to those events and those workshops where you're like, hey, okay, I'm going to spend my money on going to a workshop about self-improvement. I'm going to go to a workshop on shadow work. Do you want to meet the people that are authentic and genuine and know themselves and are healthy? Go to those retreats. Save up your pennies, find those people, invest in yourself, because once you start investing in yourself, you will start finding the other people investing in themselves. That's how this works. We are a community-based being. We are a we. Like we try to exist as individuals so much, but we are not. We are so connected to this earth. We are so connected to each other. It's not like we just pop out of an egg. Like, human creates human, families create families. We are all so interconnected. So the more that your energy exudes authenticity and curiosity and doing the work, doing the healing, being that person, you will find those people. That's just how it works. It's just how it works.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so one more thing. We got to go out with this word death. We got to circle back to death, I feel like, or it wouldn't be complete. The ultimate completion. Okay, so it's such a big topic. I'm just curious. Okay, so the word death practices just keeps popping into my head over and over, right? Because we've talked like outside of the podcast about death practices and how, just for me, I haven't had this level of experience you have, but I think about death, and it's like it is part of my practice of learning to live, right? And so it's been a huge thing for me, and I think about it regularly, and I have had deep plant medicine journeys about it. I've had just so many experiences now where I have gone really deep with it. And so I'm just curious, how does this inform you now? And like, I feel like you've got to have some thoughts and like things to share surrounding this topic. So I'm just curious what you have to say.
Thank you for asking that. I love the question about death practices. I do have a few that I do myself, and then it's so much fun to research what different cultures do for different death practices. I worked with a death doula. I still work with them sometimes. It's very interesting, the different modalities and options and ways to work through things. I am getting ready to release a death meditation on my website, which hopefully will be up by the time that this podcast gets released. So the death meditations just came to me intuitively, and the one that was particularly powerful involved me going into a meditative state after a really big trigger happened, and I was like, oh no, and I felt this need to run away, and at the same time I was like, I gotta run towards this. So I went into this state of meditation, and I felt like I just let spirit guide the process, and it was very intense. So in the meditation, I stood in a line of myself. In the line, I could not really look behind me because those were like all the future versions of myself. But looking forward, I could see all the past iterations of myself. And me, in the moment that I was in, I was like bouncing in between the two versions, the one that I wanted to leave from the meditation as, and the one that I felt like I entered the meditation as. And in this experience, the version of me that I wanted to leave the meditation as started talking to who walked into this space as. And I looked at them with such gratitude and grief. Like, you have been carrying so much that is not yours to carry. And at the same time, the reason that you're carrying all of this is because you love. You love so deeply, you care about people so deeply that these things affect you more than you want them to. There is no shame. There is no judgment. There is just curiosity. How interesting. How grateful I am for the medicine that you have, for what you taught me, that you got me to this point. Like, I'm so grateful that you got me to this point. And at the same time, it's time for you to go. Death is not a bad thing. Death is not a bad thing. You can invite death into your life and understand that it isn't something to be afraid of. It is not something to fear. You can be grateful for all of the past versions of yourself and choose to not hold shame for them and for how they have, whatever they have done to try and survive. Because that's really what happened. If you've made choices that you are not thrilled with, the choices you've made in the past, you were trying to survive. You were doing the best that you could at that time. So I sat with myself and I just cradled the past version of myself and whispered gratitude to them, whispered love, and was like, death is not a bad thing. It is time for you to pass on, and in the future, it will be time for me to become a new version of myself. In this moment, this is your death. I'm going to take the wisdom that you've given me, the things that you've taught me, and the things that I choose to bring into this next version of myself. You will still exist. You will still be here. Your essence will still be here. And parts of you, I choose to let go of and no longer identify with. And then in the visualization for me personally, I had this like ceremonial blade and I put it into my past self in the vision, and myself felt no pain and just passed on. And then this new version of myself, as soon as I had let go of that old version, I felt myself wrap up, and it felt like this like cocoon of like mud and sticks and leaves just like came over my body, and I just laid there imagining that this new version of me was sitting in the cocoon. And I sat there and I just chose, this parts of my past self I'm going to take with me. These parts, I thank you for your medicine. I honor your journey. You are not coming with us in the next phase. I sat there and just pieced out all of these different things about myself. I honored my past self. And when I chose that I was ready, I peeled the cocoon off of myself. I sat up, and the meditation was so powerful that my body felt new again. I had gone into this meditation with this trigger having a lot of physical pain. It's very intense. And coming out of it, I was like, my body feels all tingly. My muscles are relaxed. I've done the deep breathing. The oxygen has filled my body. I was like, wow, the power of thought, the power of a death meditation. Your body literally feels different. the energy changes. If you can let yourself go that deep, you can come out of it and feel different. And there were times in the next few days where I would feel my past self being like, hey, we want to come back from the dead. I'm like, no, we made our choice. This is our choice. We are choosing a better version of ourselves. I know you want to feel shame about this. That is not welcome. I know you want to control this. That is not welcome. We are choosing trust. We are choosing love. Oh, death practices. Death meditations are big for me. I have a death box. So my death doula helped me create a death box that is both for whenever the physical end comes for me, that it will hold the will that I'm working on and the end of life paperwork, practicals, sure. But more in the soon future, it holds coping mechanisms, journaling, sensory toys. It contains herbs, like cleansing herbs that I can burn, herbs that I can ingest. Like it's a coping mechanism box. It's a death box. So I do have very intense flashbacks and episodes that come up because what I went through was very intense, and we didn't go into a ton of the physical symptoms that I experienced and the practicals in that, but there was a long time that I was bedridden. I couldn't take care of myself. There were times where I spent a significant amount of time where I couldn't swallow and I couldn't eat solid food, and I was on a liquid diet. And then for several months, I experienced allodynia, which is when the skin, where even the lightest feather of a touch feels like a blowtorch. The skin is that sensitive, and it's a nerve issue. It's something that happens in the brain. It was a rough experience. And because also all I wanted was to be held. I was in so much pain. I was so scared. I was so sad. All I wanted was to be held, and my body wouldn't let me. My skin was on fire. It hurt to wear clothes. So I have flashbacks to those experiences, especially in the summertime, because that was the worst of it. So I have these experiences, I go into these episodes, and it feels like I'm time traveling. It feels like I'm back in those experiences, and it all comes up. And the shaman that I worked with talked about soul retrieval. In experiences that are very traumatic, it is possible to just leave parts of yourself back there because it was so hard that you disassociated so hard that you just kind of left fragments of yourself. So in these moments where I'm having flashbacks, where I feel like I'm time traveling, the invitation that has been offered to me is to use that opportunity to just go back and just take that piece of myself that got left back there and just tuck it back. Be like, oh, that's me. I want that piece, that softness that I left behind because I felt like I needed to be hard to survive. I want that softness back. That softness is medicine. That softness is me. I deserve softness. I choose that. So when you have moments of traumatic flashbacks, whatever they may be, we all have things that we've been through that we'll have memories of that we're like, nope, don't like that. That's not fun. Use those moments as an opportunity to do a soul retrieval, to say that piece of myself that I feel like I lost in that moment. Okay, I'm taking that back. Do you find yourself back in that same memory again? Okay, maybe there's more than one piece. Maybe it's just going to take time to gather all of those pieces, but you're taking that power back because death is not a bad thing. You can choose. You are the magic. So soul retrieval is another death practice for me, using the death box that reminds me of those things, that gives me the coping mechanisms, that just is another place to remind me of my power and my magic and my safety. Another death practice that I feel like is important is taking the time to feel the feelings. I attend a sacred rage practice here locally, and sacred rage is a fascinating medicine. It's so beautiful, but it is feeling all of your feelings. It is the invitation to feel the rage that you were never allowed to feel the sadness and the grief that you never felt like you could feel before. But you put it all out, you give it all back to Mother Earth. And then afterwards, it's like peeing after a really long road trip. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, I feel so much relief. I want to drink a bunch of water. God, water has never tasted so good to me before. Like, oh, I'm thirsty. I didn't realize I was dehydrated because I was so full. I didn't have capacity to put anything else in me, but now that it's out of me, oh, okay. Like, your emotions, your feelings, your body does not want to be ignored. So if your body hurts, if you are sad, if you cannot get out of that depression, that anxiety, maybe you need to sit with it. Maybe you need to go and have tea with your death and be like, hey, what is it that you're trying to teach me? Maybe I'm so sad. Maybe I'm grieving so much because I love so much. Like, you cannot have love without grief. That's why people are afraid of commitment. That's why people are afraid to be vulnerable and love, because if you love, you will grieve. People will pass away. People will leave. You will leave. You will move. People will move. Love and grief are best friends, and also the same thing. Choosing to sit with those emotions and honor that if I am feeling this much pain, what is that teaching me? Sitting with your emotions, finding your own rage practice, finding your own release practice, and with that, finding your own self-pleasure practice. If you're gonna feel the pain, let yourself feel the pleasure. Okay, do the rage practice, scream, cry, safely break things, whatever it is that you need to do. Rage on a canvas with crayons and markers and splatter paint and get war paint on your face and feel all of the things, and then go bathe in the waters, wash it all away. And then as you have emptied yourself of all of the let your body feel the pleasure, touch your body, create your own practices of both death and life, of both pain and pleasure. Your death practices should not just be grief. Your death practices should also be a celebration of life. Funerals and wakes are often called celebrations of life. That there's a reason for that. We are grateful for the person's existence. Be grateful for your own existence. You get a body. Do you know how much pleasure bodies can feel? Like, have you experienced it? If not, why not? What's stopping you? What's the block? Go into your death practices. Figure out what you need to put to death in order to figure out what you need to birth. Because if you're missing something, if you're like, man, I really wish I had this, what's the opposite of that thing that you're not letting yourself feel? That you're not diving into? Harmony, balance, this and that, yin and yang, all of it.
That is a great way to close. That was so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Wow. This has been a journey today, like a really deep journey. We traveled all over.
For sure.
And your story, I think you said this at one point, but it's amazing. And you're so beautiful. And it matters.
It does.
And thank you for sharing your medicine. It's so deep, it's so diverse, it's so beautiful. So I just really appreciate you speaking these words today.
Thank you for creating the cup that I could pour my medicine into. And I truly hope for everyone to just like sit with the cup, sip on as much and as little as you want to sip on. You get to decide what you take with you, what you're like, that was for me. Not everything in this entire episode was for you. Everything in this entire episode was for me, for sure. But as far as each person listening, like, you get to decide. There's no shame if you're like, that practice was not for me. Be curious. Why is it not for you? Okay, no worries. No skin off my back. Like, this is my story and my medicine that saved my own life. But I do genuinely hope, pray, and desire that for whatever peace and peace, two words at the same time, whatever peace you want to find from this, that you choose that you find that within yourself. But at the end of the day, the bottom line is that yes, this is my medicine. I hope for you to take whatever you need from it, but you are your own medicine. Whatever I am saying that resonates with you is you. You're seeing parts of yourself in my story. The parts that really stick out to you, that's because I'm just being a mirror right now. And whatever parts you recognize yourself in, like, that's, trust yourself. Trust the process. Trust that you are the magic that you need for your own healing, and the parts that stand out to you are standing out for a reason, and the parts that aren't standing out for a reason. If you spaced out during part of this, that's okay. This was a long episode. Maybe there were parts that you needed to hear more than others. Again, no shame, no judgment, just curiouser and curiouser. Thank you for having me.
Trust yourself. Yes. Thank you. All right. Well, we're going to do this again.
Yes, I would love that.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Till next time.